Hello and welcome back to my next part in my 53D series of QNAP setup videos. Now today I want to talk about backing up. Let's face it, when you're buying a NAS, a number of you will buy it because you're looking for some form of backup. As I've mentioned many times in the past, these devices are only backups if used appropriately, and a real backup strategy has multiple tiers. If you've got mobile phones all backing up to this NAS device like you see here in front of me, all these different files and folders, and then start deleting files from the mobile phones, from the tablets, the laptops or whatever, then you don't have a backup anymore. What you have is a device that is filled with the only copies of that data. So having an appropriate backup strategy that has multiple tiers and most certainly duplicates of files in different physical or network locations is incredibly important. Now, there are quite a lot of ways to handle data on a QNAP NAS. If you go to the App Center, there's lots of first-party and third-party apps. Even if you go to the trouble of going to the QTS Essentials area, it lists loads of tools. Some of them are more designed for internet and network-based access. And if you've got the QNAP Cloud tool to allow internet access to your NAS, you're half the way there. If you go into the All Apps section, however, you start to see loads of different tools. You've got things that involve the cloud and sending and repackaging of data and backups, such as Acronis, such as Arcware, such as AWS working with Amazon Cloud S3 services, and you have more and more as you scroll through. Some of them less known than others: iDrive, Elephant Drive, and more, all the way through, scrolling through lots of them. And although a number of these are good tools, it should be highlighted that the majority of them require a cloud subscription, which isn't the end of the world to say, but you will have to have another tier of that strategy being paid for on a third-party cloud server. So whether you want to do that or not is up to you. Now, whether you're using a 53D or if you're using any of the QNAP range, it has to be said that one of the best tools when it comes to your backup strategy is Hybrid Backup Sync. Currently in Hybrid Backup Sync version 3, and in this one user-friendly tool, you have a whole myriad of ways in which you can conduct your backup strategy. I'm just going to get rid of that. We don't want to display that next time. And this whole tool will give you countless ways to create your perfect backup strategy. So first and foremost, it's worth highlighting that if you want, you can back up not only within your NAS, but externally in a ton of ways. So if we go to the Jobs, Sync and Backup and Restore tabs on the side here, we can get some idea about the ways in which we can back up data on our QNAP. So firstly, let's go through some of those terms. Backup and restore. Backup means, obviously, to send data to another source, but to copy it as a means of having another tier of retrieval in the event of a problem. Restore means to actually pull that data back from a source in order to get it back. Synchronization is when you have two or more locations where the data is constantly being fed to and from them to make sure that these sources collaborate together. Now, the reason for that is, rather than just the word sync, is twofold. Let's have a look at a synchronization. Now, as you see, there are three different options: a two-way sync, a one-way sync, and an active sync. A two-way sync is when the two sources are synchronized together at all times and kept identical. A one-way sync is when one is sending to the other, and any changes that happen on the former are then carried over to the latter, and you can actually have all of the files that you delete from the former be retained on the latter. An active sync is kind of like a combination of the two, but with more formative rules for you to utilize. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's look at that backup and restore. Now, let's do a backup job. Now, this backup job can be done a number of ways. Let's choose, for starters, what is the file or folder on our NAS we want to back up first. So let's say we're running surveillance. We're running cameras all the time that are running lots of footage from the cameras in our home or office environment. Let's say we want to record some of that data and make sure that that is the data that's maintained. Now, you may create subfolders in here for all of your cameras, but let's say we want to retain the surveillance data. We're going to go for those 3 folders and then click Next. The next thing it's going to ask us to do is say, where do we want the data to go? Now, the options, once again, are pretty big. Now, you can, if you like, just keep it within the NAS, and you can send the data within the NAS to another place on exactly the same NAS. So you can have 2 folders in the same NAS that are creating a backup of one to the other. Now, you might find that useful if you've got multiple users or multiple apps accessing the same data, but personally, I would not recommend utilizing that as a method, because that's not backing up, that's just handing data around. And if you select the local NAS option, you'll be able to institute those options. If you've got another NAS on the local area network, and it doesn't have to be a QNAP, select this option here, and it will allow you to enter the IP of the NAS in your local area network, then enter the login information of that server, and then you'll be able to see their own file folder structure. Now again, you can do this with a QNAP NAS, you can do it with a Synology or an Acer Store NAS. You can send that data back and forth if you so choose. It can even search the local area network for NASes that might be available. And then from there, you can click the drop down and it will go through all the available NASes in that local area network. Alternatively, you can just enter the IP of the NAS on your local area network, and it will then enter that information, and then you can log in and then begin your synchronization with the remote NAS on your local area network. Not in the same NAS, but definitely on the same network. I've done a whole video on Hybrid Backup Sync 3, and I recommend you check it out. Next, we can scroll down and look at the other options. Next, we can look at cloud service providers. Now, these are the ones where they are third-party clouds that we mentioned earlier, and if you click on any of these, all you need to do is enter your login or authentication key details depending on the cloud service provider you're choosing, and then it will create a funnel between the NAS and that cloud service. So say, for example, I select Google Drive. As we know, I've utilized a chuck-away NAS Compare Gmail account for a long time. We can then link that Gmail account here when the window pops up. Now, the amount of time it takes will depend on the authentication of the one in question. As you can see, I've got a couple of throwaway Gmails there, and if we select that account there, it will then ask us either to enter our password, or if we've already entered the password, which I've done prior to the start of this video, we can then click allow, and it will link these 2 services. Once you've linked that service, it will then list the available files and folders on that cloud service, and then from there we can then distribute the data from the NAS onto this cloud service. You can name it, and it's quite straightforward, and then from there click create, and it will create that job. There's still more cloud service providers below, and you can add more as time wears on. You can even create a USB backup from this point. If you've got a USB drive connected, go to the local NAS option, then click select, and then find the USB drive that you've connected, which is what I've done here. Then you can select that local USB drive for your backups. There's another whole tool dedicated to USB backups that I'll show you in another video. From there, once you've selected your destination, click OK. Now, regardless of whichever service provider you've decided on, be it the internet-based cloud services, another NAS, or a USB drive on your local NAS, this is the screen you're going to see. You have to name the job, which I'm going to call USB Backup. And I've selected those folders there that were inside the surveillance area. From here, we can then select where we want it to go on this drive. I've already selected the folder, but you can change it quite easily on the previous screen. Then we click Next. From here, we can say how and when we want the job to begin. We can say that it can be on a schedule at a certain time of day in any time of the day or the week or the month. We can run it just the once if we want, as well as having it running concurrently with other jobs. So if you have other jobs listed, they will be listed here. So you can set it up that once one action is completed, this one will begin. You can have no schedule, so it can be done ad hoc every time you do it. Or in the case of USB drives, you can do an auto backup, whereby as soon as that USB drive is connected to this system, it will run this backup job automatically. And from there, you can then say if you want the job to start first time, or quite usefully for the USB drives, you can eject the external drive safely at the end of every backup, and you'll get a beep on the NAS to let you know it's done. Now, version backups are quite important. This is where you can create multiple versions of your files over time. This means that, say for example, you are using a USB drive regularly, and that USB drive, you fill it with 2 gig of data every single day, and it's a 16 gigabyte USB disk. With version management, you can create an image of those files being created every single time. So that means if you need to go back to a version of those files from, say, a week or 2 weeks ago, even though you've created backups since then, this will allow you to revert back to that older version, and you can really configure a number of those options really easily. If we click Next, going forward, we can then apply filters. Now remember, all of these steps apply to both USB backups, NAS-to-NAS backups, and let's not forget cloud backups too. We can apply filters if we choose, and filters allow us to say we want to back up the contents of the folder that we're working with, but we don't want to use certain file types. We can say files above or below a certain size, files that were only modified within a certain date, file types, and different kinds of file format. There's loads of options here to make sure your backup only covers the files and folders that you want it to. On top of that, if we remove the file filter, we can look at QNAP. Now, deduplication is quite a cool little thing. It allows for, if you're running backups of a huge array of data where there's lots of the same file in that file and folder, such as in the case of backing up several different PCs with Windows, deduplication is when files and folders, it can see that the same file exists in 4 different locations. So rather than back it up 4 times, it backs it up once and keeps a record of where it lives in the other cases. And then using QDedup, if you do want to restore your backup, it will then intelligently restore it. The result is that with QDedup, you can reduce the size of your backups, even if you're backing up 4 operating systems of Windows that are near enough identical on 4 PCs, you'll only utilize the storage space of around 1 PC's worth of data. It's incredibly useful and definitely something that requires its own dedicated video in the future. Now, other options with regards to policies where you can create the encryption, so safe end-to-end encryption of data traveling between the USB drive or NAS-to-NAS or whatever, can be handled here, as well as other rules that work in the background to make sure not only are your backups safe, but also kept in a clean and accessible state. And finally, you can configure other settings that apply more towards individual backups and more in a settings and background than anything else. Not really affecting the backups themselves, but more the process of the backup and making sure it doesn't impede the overall performance of your NAS and the connected system that you're backing up. And that's it. Here at the end, we've got the summary where we can create the backup that we've been going through. As you can see, I haven't set a time limit, and we've got the destination locally on a USB, but we could have selected any destinations all the way through. And if we create the backup now, it will apply all of that logic that we ran earlier. We can run this backup ad hoc, or if we had a time management, then it will happen every time we connect the USB or at a certain time of day, depending on the settings that we wanted. We can even edit the rules of this backup really easily, just clicking the edit button and going through all of the tabs and settings that we saw earlier. It really is a user-friendly and incredibly detailed tool. If we go back to the overview, we're able to see all of the different jobs that we've created. We can create preset alarms. We can even create preset storage spaces for backups in either direction. And if you're running deduplication on local PC and Mac systems, just make sure you've downloaded the QDedup application for Windows or Mac or Ubuntu systems on all of the systems you want to back up, and that ensures that deduplication runs successfully on multiple OS systems all running at once to minimize the size of your backups. Now, let's go and have a look at that synchronization tool that we saw earlier. Now, the synchronization tool is incredibly similar to the backup tool we've looked at, but synchronization and backups differ in one main way. Backups are a form of protection. Synchronization is a means of having live, up-to-the-minute synchronicity between different files, folders, and systems, both internally and externally. Let's do a two-way sync job. And as mentioned, a two-way synchronization job will be between this NAS and an external source. So once again, we've got all of those cloud services and the NAS-to-NAS services. So this time, let's do a synchronization job with Google Drive. We've already set it up, so hopefully this should be pretty straightforward. We can go ahead and confirm the link to that Google account. We click Allow, and now it's created that link with that Google Drive. Let's call this two-way sync. It's got the available capacity there on screen and the total amount. It's a throwaway account, and we can even use, if it has an SSL certificate on the cloud service, and of course Google does, that's where we find it. So then we click Create. So now we're creating our two-way sync job between the NAS and my Google Drive. As we can see, there's the NAS, there's the synchronization job, there's the two-way sync job for the Google Drive, and now that Google Drive is going to be synchronized with the NAS. So we click Select. So the two-way sync job is begun. We can say what are the files and folders on these two respective platforms we want to synchronize. So for now, let's select something small here on the PC for synchronization. If we go into the multimedia folder, let's go for this music folder here. And let's select an album. I've got lots of albums available. Let's go for the Home Alone soundtrack because I'm cool. On the other hand, we'll look at on the cloud platform, we can see the files and folders here. Now we have to select where we want the directory to be. It's going to find all of the different files and folders here. And I'll go for something quite small. Let's have a look. Something nice and easy. We'll go with the music folder there. And now we've got our two-way synchronization ready. We can now set up the rules between this synchronization between these two respective areas. We can say if there's the same files and folders in either location, that it will rename, replace, delete, or overwrite as needed. If we click Next, we can now set the settings for when we want the job to take place, just like before, with synchronization being constant, or with real-time synchronization, or on a schedule, so it doesn't eat up all of our bandwidth over the network. We can apply the same filters, the same policies, and the same configuration options to make sure that it doesn't use up all of our hardware resources whilst it's running. And there you go. We've created our two-way sync with a cloud service and the NAS. Now bear in mind, this is not the same as hybrid mount. Hybrid mount is what we will be talking about in our next video, with hybrid mount being the means of creating an access point between your NAS and a cloud service and mounting it as if to appear locally. This allows you to create a file and a folder structure on your NAS that lives on the cloud or another NAS. However, your local NAS can then treat it as if it was local, and you can use QMAGI, Video Station, Plex, and more. And there we go. We've now created the two different jobs on this system. We have got the synchronized space now living from that Google Drive, and we've got that backup job that we've created for the USB backup. Now, based on the amount of cloud service provider capacity you have and the size of your USB drive, I've now shown you two ways to create two extra tiers of backup strategy for the data on your NAS. We've got the two jobs listed there on the Jobs tab and the different services whilst they're running in the background. If you're utilizing other service providers such as Apple Time Machine for entire image backups, or you're going to be backing up and sending data to and from third-party NAS servers using rsync or RTRR, real-time remote replication, they'll appear here. There are so many things you can do with this tool, and it will allow you to truly turn your 53D into a backup, not just a repository of your files. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I look forward to going through in my next stage of videos mounting cloud storage as well as utilizing connections with G Suite and Office 365, as well as helping you guys understand the importance of virtual JBOD. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed this rather dull video today, but I think it's dull but important. Click like if you found this video helpful. Click subscribe if you want to learn more, and I'll see you next time.